And just how far did the Obama administration go to get the Iran nuclear deal done? This is Special Report. Good evening and welcome to Washington. I'm Shannon Bream in for Bret Baier. First Lady Melania Trump was with her husband, the president, this afternoon for a briefing about the hurricane season. Earlier in the day, the president unleashed a rhetorical hurricane, ripping into the media for its coverage of his wife. This afternoon, the president was in a forgiving mood. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has that for us tonight. Good evening, John.
Shannon, good evening to you. A White House official tells Fox News that the recent spate of presidential pardons and commutations is just the beginning, that President Trump is actively considering another half dozen, with dozens more being reviewed by White House staff.
We had a season last year like no other in terms of the power, the level, the hurricanes, the fires along the West Coast.
President Trump at FEMA headquarters today for his annual briefing on the upcoming hurricane season. But it was his powers of presidential pardon that took center stage today. The White House announcing President Trump is commuting the sentence of Alice Marie Johnson. Last week, Kim Kardashian called on the president to ask him to pardon Johnson, a great-grandmother who has been jailed since 1996 on a nonviolent drug charge. While the commutation fell short of a full pardon, the White House praised Johnson's rehabilitation in a statement saying Ms. Johnson has accepted responsibility for her past behavior and has been a model prisoner over the past 2 decades.
I'd like to sort of maybe say and pay some respects to some of the people here today. I have a list. Of course, we have to start with our great First Lady, Melania. Thank you, Melania.
At the president's side today, during the FEMA briefing, First Lady Melania Trump. The first time she has been seen on camera since a medical procedure May 14th.
She went through a little rough patch, but she's doing great, and we're very proud of her. She's done a fantastic job as First Lady. The people love you. People of our country love you. So thank you, honey.
The First Lady was out of public view for 22 days, prompting speculation in many media outlets that something was amiss. Ahead of today's appearance, President Trump hammering the speculation, tweeting, "The fake news media has been so unfair and vicious to my wife and our great First Lady, Melania. During her recovery from surgery, they reported everything from near death to facelift to left the White House and me for New York or Virginia to abuse. All fake. She is doing really well."
Secretary Nielsen, I don't know, what do I say about you? You are doing great.
President Trump today also spreading a little love around for cabinet members on the front lines of disaster response and throwing a big bone to his embattled EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt.
Administrator Scott Pruitt, thank you, Scott, very much. EPA is doing really, really well. And, you know, somebody has to say that about you a little bit. You know that, Scott.
Pruitt, long under scrutiny for lavish spending and security demands, was most recently under fire for asking an aide to contact Chick-fil-A about a possible franchise for his wife and for asking an aide to look into whether he could buy a used mattress from the Trump International Hotel.
People are really impressed with the job that's being done at the EPA. Thank you very much, Scott.
Today, 2 top aides to Pruitt at the EPA announced that they were resigning. Milan Hupp, who is the aide that Pruitt asked to try to procure the used mattress from the Trump Hotel, announced that she is going to be leaving on Friday. According to published reports, Hupp got tired of Pruitt throwing her under the bus and seeing her name in print. The other official to be leaving is reportedly Sarah Greenwald, top attorney there and one of Pruitt's closest advisors. Both Greenwald and Hupp were at the center of the recent controversy over pay increases at the EPA that ran afoul of White House guidelines. Shannon?
John Roberts live for us at the White House. Thank you, John. Normally, it's the FBI on the side of prosecutors offering deals to potential criminal witnesses. Tonight, the former number 2 man at the FBI is seeking immunity for himself. Andrew McCabe wants the protection in exchange for telling Congress what he knows about Hillary Clinton's emails. Also tonight, a new report taking issue with the former head man at the Bureau and how he did his job. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge has details on these astounding developments. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Shannon. The Inspector General's report puts Director Comey's leadership style under the microscope, with the Inspector General exploring whether Comey went beyond his authorities in July 2016 when he publicly discussed the Clinton email investigation and recommended against criminal criminal charges a responsibility that fell to his boss at the time, Attorney General Loretta Lynch. Comey has since explained that Lynch's Arizona tarmac meeting with Bill Clinton just days before Hillary Clinton's FBI interview for mishandling classified information was a game changer, in addition to other intelligence that implied Lynch would not let the email investigation go too far. That intelligence is not public and its reliability unclear. On Fox, the former director seemed to choose his words carefully about Lynch.
Well, actually, I think we're both telling the truth. I never went to her and said, Loretta, I think you should recuse yourself. My problem was she had already announced it publicly that she wouldn't and that she would accept my recommendation. And so at that point, what do I do? And I decided at that point I got to step away from her.
In a separate development, Fox News confirms that former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, who worked directly under Comey, wants a special status if he testifies on Capitol Hill. It's called use immunity, and it means McCabe's testimony cannot be used against him in a criminal prosecution. The Inspector General found that McCabe lied under oath and made a criminal referral to the U.S. Attorney here in Washington, D.C. for lying to federal investigators. This morning, a senior Senate Republican on the Judiciary Committee recommended against a deal to secure McCabe's testimony.
We really need to get to the bottom of what happened at the FBI during the Comey years, where apparently there was misconduct going on, which I think has really impugned the reputation of the finest law enforcement agency in the world, and we need to clear the air. And so I think giving Mr. McCabe cover through immunity would be a mistake.
McCabe's lawyers said, quote, McCabe is willing to testify, but because of the criminal referral, he must be afforded suitable legal protection, adding that if he were unable to get such a deal, McCabe, quote, will have no choice but to invoke his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. Testimony is scheduled for Monday before the Senate Judiciary Committee that has the lead on the Inspector General's report, but that date could slip yet again, Shannon.
Yeah, we'll wait and see. Catherine, thank you very much. Rudy Giuliani says the special prosecutor's team is trying to frame the president. Giuliani made the comment about Robert Mueller during an interview in Israel.
A group of 13 highly partisan Democrats that make up the Mueller team, excluding him, are trying very, very hard to frame him, to get him in trouble when he hasn't done anything wrong.
Giuliani also says the Mueller team cannot come to grips with the fact that collusion did not happen. Members of the U.S. House can go ahead with their summer vacation plans. The House Majority Leader says the August recess is still on, even as senators plan to work through most of it. Exactly what those senators will be working on, well, that's still undecided. Here's Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel.
The Majority Leader.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell may have bought himself more time to check some items off his list of priorities.
We need to confirm more of the president's team and judicial nominees. We need to take up regular appropriation bills. We need to tackle legislative priorities like the water infrastructure bill, the farm bill, the defense bill, and many others. So the Senate will remain in session in August.
But at least one GOP senator has a priority of his own, keeping President Trump's trade policies in check.
Because they're utilizing it in this unprecedented way, what we've asked is, hey, you can continue to do all the things you're doing and negotiate, but once you complete the work, you have to submit it to us for approval, because tariffs and revenues are the responsibilities of Congress, not the executive branch.
And the Democratic leader tipped his hand on how he wants to spend August now that the Senate is in session, playing to his base.
Why don't we get something done on the issue that numerous polls say is the #1 priority of Americans, health care? We Democrats, our entire caucus, believes this previously unscheduled session time can be put to good use.
President Trump applauded McConnell's call to keep the Senate working, saying on Twitter, great, maybe the Democrats will finally get something done other than their acceptance of high crime and high taxes. His praise may have fallen on deaf ears with House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who said he has no plans to keep the House open, telling reporters, I understand why the Senate needs to finish their work. We've been doing our work. And the man whose job McCarthy is eyeing wants to thread the needle on an issue that threatens to derail the GOP.
I feel good about the kind of conversations we're having. Our members are earnest and sincere in trying to understand each other's perspectives. We have a big swath of views within our conference on this issue, and I really do believe that there's a sweet spot here.
To be clear, McCarthy is not attacking McConnell. He's merely noting the House has passed hundreds more bills, and he too blames Senate Democrats for obstruction. But with some of the items on the to-do list controversial, it might just turn out to be a long, hot summer in Congress. Shannon?
All right, Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Mike. The interim head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is disbanding 3 boards whose members include consumer advocacy groups. It's part of a broader overhaul of the agency by White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney, who says the organization is too powerful and has overstepped its mandate to stamp out lending abuses. The Dow surged 346 points today to close back above the 25,000 mark. The S&P 500 was up 24. NASDAQ finished ahead 51. President Trump is touting his own influence and high Republican turnout in primary elections held yesterday in 8 states. Much of the focus, of course, was on California, where the state's unusual jungle format could have locked out one party completely out of the November races. Correspondent Peter Ducey is in Del Mar tonight with an update.
California's gubernatorial primary didn't have a blue wave, instead a Republican riptide.
Make California the golden state once again.
With that familiar sounding slogan, after a strong finish that put him on the ballot, Republican John Cox is channeling President Trump, while Democrat Gavin Newsom is tweeting to him, urging the commander-in-chief to go further than just congratulating the candidate he helped with an endorsement with this, quote, "Please come campaign for him as much as possible."
Voters will have a real choice this November between a governor who's going to stand up to Donald Trump and a foot soldier in his war on California.
But Cox is correcting Newsom.
And it wasn't Donald Trump that passed the sanctuary state. Gavin, you did that.
For weeks, California's airwaves were blanketed with campaign commercials, but turnout was still a soft 21.9%, 3% lower than the 2014 gubernatorial primary. Some voters ran into trouble because a printing problem in LA County left 118,000 residents off the rolls at 1,500 precincts.
In some of those, it was as many as a few hundred.
It wasn't just a long night for the LA registrar. It took hours to learn that Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein, who failed to win the state party's endorsement, would be challenged by the more progressive state senator Kevin De Leon. It also took a while until results in Orange County's expensive primaries began to trickle in, and when they did, Democrats were relieved to have seen candidates claw their way onto ballots everywhere, including districts they risked coming in third place, too low for the November ballot. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee says its data-driven investments to California will continue to pay dividends in November and beyond. Talk like that doesn't impress one incumbent who won with a healthy margin last night, Republican Congressman Dana Rohrabacher.
How many times do we have to hear, oh, there's a blue wave and it's going to knock us all down? Well, the blue wave didn't hit.
Republicans are defending 10 House seats here and found out late last night they've got something new to offer voters who are also hearing from a very energized Democratic base, and that is the opportunity to vote for the first Republican governor, to elect the first Republican governor in this state since Schwarzenegger. Shannon?
Well, everybody agrees he's got an uphill battle, but we've seen other things happen. Peter Ducey, thank you very much for your reporting out there in California. Northern California voters have recalled a judge from office after he sentenced a former Stanford University swimmer convicted of sexual assault to a short jail sentence instead of to prison. Santa Clara County Judge Aaron Persky is the first California judge to be recalled since 1932. Republicans in Montana have selected a candidate to go up against one of the incumbent Senate Democrats considered most beatable this fall. But it's not going to be easy. Correspondent Dan Springer reports again tonight from Helena, Montana.
This is going to be one of the most competitive races in the nation. John Tester is vulnerable, and President Trump has made winning Montana a priority.
Right after his narrow victory in the Republican primary, Montana State Auditor Matt Rosendale turned his attention to two-term incumbent Senator John Tester. The populist Democrat and former rancher is trying to keep his seat in a state that handed President Trump a lopsided victory over Hillary Clinton 2 years ago. Hoping to maintain his majority and eyeing Montana as a possible pickup, the National Republican Senate Committee issued a statement saying Rosendale will be Montana's next senator because voters deserve strong leaders who put Montanans first every day instead of just paying lip service in election years. Tester's camp was just as quick with its opening salvo, highlighting his deep family roots in Big Sky country compared to Rosendale's 16 years. Matt Rosendale's an East Coast developer who looks out for himself. Maryland Matt uses Montana to boost the outside interests that are funding his Senate campaign. It's an attack line used by Rosendale's primary opponents, but it may not be his biggest weakness. Montana has a history of putting colorful personality over party. Rosendale's low-key style showed at a victory speech with only a few dozen supporters.
Rosendale has to find a way to connect with voters in Montana. In the 2016 election, when he ran statewide for state auditor, Trump won the state by 20 points. Rosendale won it by 7 points.
The great equalizer and wild card could be President Trump. He has targeted Tester in this election and would likely boost Rosendale's chances with a campaign visit or two. Without a single poll conducted yet, Real Clear Politics has this race leaning Democrat, but there's a long 5 months to go. Shannon?
Dan Springer in Montana, thank you. Up next, did the Obama administration purposely mislead Congress and you to get the Iran nuclear deal done? First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 35 in Richmond as police arrest a soldier who they say stole an armored personnel carrier from a National Guard base. He was chased for more than 60 miles by police. Officers couldn't stop this vehicle. It actually drives on tracks like a tank. So they ended up escorting it, sirens blazing ahead and behind, before the suspect finally stopped near Richmond's City Hall. Fox 2 in San Francisco, where voters approved a ban on selling flavored tobacco products. City supervisors unanimously approved the ban last year, but it was put on hold after tobacco company R.J. Reynolds collected enough signatures to put it on the ballot. And this is a live look at Detroit from Fox 2. The big story there tonight, Michigan voters will decide whether to legalize the recreational use of marijuana. A citizen-initiated measure was not approved by the Republican-controlled legislature before the 40-day deadline passed yesterday, and that means the ballot initiative will get a public vote in November. That is tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. A Republican congressional report says the Obama administration deliberately misled Congress and the public in its efforts to funnel billions of dollars to Iran as part of the nuclear deal. Correspondent Rich Edson has the specifics tonight from the State Department.
After signing the 2015 nuclear agreement, Iran had a $6 billion problem. The nuclear deal gave Iran access to its international bank accounts. One account in Oman held about $6 billion in local currency. To use it, the Iranians needed to convert that money first to U.S. dollars, then to euros. And the Obama administration was ready to help.
I think they did so because they were desperate to get a deal. So on the one hand, they were saying that the Iranians were not going to get access to the American financial system. On the other hand, they actually granted Iran a specific license to allow them to take some of the funds that had been in escrow.
A report from the Republican majority of the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations says the Obama administration bypassed existing sanctions and cleared the way for Iran to use the U.S. financial system, even as officials claimed that would never happen. The Senate report cites pledges from then Treasury Secretary Jack Lew and other top administration officials.
Iran will be denied access to the world's most important market and unable to deal in the world's most important currency.
The report says that in January 2016, Iran complained about its nearly $6 billion stuck in an Oman bank. 1 month later, the Obama Treasury Department issued a license, allowing a transaction the federal government would otherwise prohibit. Officials then tried to persuade 2 U.S. banks to execute it. The report says, quote, both U.S. banks eventually declined, primarily due to the unwillingness to take on the legal and compliance risk, but also reputational concerns in doing business with a comprehensively sanctioned country like Iran. A former administration official refused to go on record, though tells Fox News the license fulfilled U.S. commitments under the nuclear agreement to, quote, give Iran access to pools of its money held overseas. This specific license cannot be described as granting access to the U.S. financial system. As for what happened to that $6 billion in Oman, the report says Iran likely retrieved it, gradually, using European banks. Shannon?
All right, Rich Edson at the State Department. We'll have more on that coming up. Thank you. Russian President Vladimir Putin says the U.S. will have to offer North Korea solid security guarantees if it wants to strike a denuclearization deal. Putin says he hopes next week's summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un produces positive results. Negotiations aimed at making that happen continue. Here's Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott.
As preparations build for next week's summit in Singapore involving North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and President Trump, new signs the regime might be backing down further. A regional think tank saying satellite images show the regime has dismantled a missile launch facility. This after last month's claimed destruction of a nuclear test site. According to his personal lawyer, President Trump forced Kim back to the bargaining table.
Kim Jong-un got back on his hands and knees and begged for it, which is exactly the position you want to put him in.
Others warn caution. Pre-summit talks continue between the U.S. and North Korea at the DMZ. Still to be confirmed how committed the regime is to denuclearize and how disarmament would be verified.
It would require a level of access and intrusiveness into North Korea that the North Koreans have never allowed.
Also in play, the possibility South Korean President Moon Jae-in will join Trump and Kim to declare an end to the decades-old Korean War. Marking that country's Memorial Day, Moon held out hope to find long-lost U.S. casualties.
I will prioritize the work of discovering the remains buried at the DMZ, including American soldiers.
And as the summit site in Singapore is readied at a luxury resort there, more folks are getting into the act. After a visit with Secretary of State Pompeo, Singapore's foreign minister goes to Pyongyang Thursday. Japanese Prime Minister Abe also meets President Trump at the White House tomorrow. And even former basketball star Dennis Rodman, an acquaintance of President Trump and North Korean leader Kim, says he's coming to Singapore as well.
No word on what, if any, role Rodman might play at the talks. At the very least, it seems, a lot of people want to elbow their way into President Trump's one-on-one with the North Korean leader. Shannon.
Greg Palcott, thank you, Greg. Special Report is headed to Singapore. By the way, Bret Baier will anchor a live Sunday edition of this show, Special Report, this weekend. He will also bring you all the latest news from the North Korea summit on Monday and Tuesday. Tune in each night, 6 p.m. Eastern. Of course, that's going to be 6 a.m. over there in the morning. Up next, the anniversary of the turning point of World War II. First, beyond our borders tonight, a trio of astronauts from Russia, the United States, and the European Space Agency blasts off on a mission to the International Space Station. The Soyuz ship has successfully entered a designated orbit and is set to dock at the space outpost Friday. An explosion at a grain silo in the eastern French city of Strasbourg injures at least 4 people. 3 victims were taken by helicopter to regional hospitals, and 1 victim with lesser injuries was treated in a nearby hospital. More than 100 firefighters and 60 emergency vehicles took part in the evacuation and rescue efforts at that site. Evacuations also continue near Guatemala's volcano of fire, with traffic jams forcing some people to simply walk, trying to escape flows of superheated debris. At least 75 people were killed in Sunday's eruption. Almost 200 people are still missing. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. The 74th anniversary of that day, considered the turning point in World War II. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin shows us how it's being remembered.
Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well trained, well equipped, and battle hardened. He will fight savagely. We will accept nothing less than full victory.
With those words, General Dwight D. Eisenhower launched the D-Day invasion, sending more than 156,000 Allied troops to free France and eventually Europe of Nazi Germany's grip. Many died on the beaches of Normandy as dawn broke on the shores of France, June 6, 1944. Visitors marked the anniversary at the American Military Cemetery above the beaches. Some who survived attended a ceremonial wreath-laying at the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C.
World War II veteran Herman Zychek stormed Upaw Beach at H hour on D-Day with the Army's 4th Infantry Division. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge and helped liberate Dachau.
And joined by Alfred Petrogallo, who was drafted as he left high school.
A member of the 190th Field Artillery Unit, he landed at Omaha Beach on D-Day +1.
We got out of the boat. and hand-to-hand battle.
Lincoln Harner was just over 19 at the time, manned the artillery, and entered Gold Beach with British forces.
It was important to get the foothold, and from then on it was a matter of where do we go next.
At a Rose Garden ceremony signing legislation to help all veterans, President Trump remembered the greatest generation.
More than 70,000 brave young Americans charged out of landing craft, jumped out of airplanes, and stormed into hell.
On the beaches of Normandy, saving Western civilization exactly 74 years ago today. At the Pentagon, Jennifer Griffin, Fox News.
Well, today, President Trump has signed a bill giving veterans more freedom to see doctors outside the troubled Veterans Affairs system. It's aimed at reducing wait times and improving care by steering more patients to the private sector. The head coach of the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles says his team plans to move on following the controversy over its canceled White House appearance. Doug Peterson spoke briefly about the matter today.
I was looking forward to going down, obviously. You know, we did something last season that was very special. It's a milestone here in the city of Philadelphia, our organization, and I was looking forward to going down and being recognized as world champions.
President Trump disinvited the Eagles after the White House learned only a few players planned to attend. A federal judge has ruled in favor of Philadelphia in its lawsuit against the federal government for withholding grant funds in response to its sanctuary city immigration policy. Philadelphia will only turn over immigrants to the feds if they have a warrant signed by a judge. In April, a federal appeals court sided with Chicago in a similar dispute. Tonight, a look at what developers hope will be America's first self-sustaining city. It's located in Florida, and it is a dream starting to come true for environmentalists and conservationists. Correspondent Phil Keating takes us there this evening.
Almost all the boxes are undone, figuring out what we need furniture-wise.
Two cats. Jasmine, Josh, Judson, and Elliot are just a couple days into their new home on a lake in a city of the future, Babcock Ranch near Fort Myers. Developed from the start with a massive solar power farm generating nearly 100% of the electric needs. It's billed as the country's first solar city. Very low carbon footprint, a soon-to-open new school, electric shuttle buses, a cute town square with shops, and an emphasis on the environment and preservation.
And be able to be a part of a community of everyone that cares and wants that for them and not only themselves but also for their children and their grandchildren.
8 developers are building homes and they're selling. Eventually, there will be 20,000 houses, a unique creation of a 45,000 person small city.
When you come in and first see all the natural areas.
Developer Sid Kitson, a former NFL lineman, plans his 18,000 acre vision to one day be fully self-sustaining.
The most environmentally responsible, the most sustainable new town that's ever been developed. And it's the first solar powered town in America. And we're very proud of that.
Urban planner John Wolschlager says all cities can get as green as Babcock Ranch eventually. The advantage here is the concept and vision came first, before the homes and people.
If you look to the distant future, it's going to be a necessity. If we want to have a good life in the future, we have to think more sustainably.
And since Day lives and works here, he has a pollution-free commute. These solar-charged shuttles will eventually be fully autonomous, meaning no drivers. And the ranch has now 150 homes under contract, less than 1% of its future. And because of the sun, that future is self-sustainable. Shannon?
Phil Keating, thank you very much. Well, the former number 2 man at the FBI wants immunity in exchange for testimony about Hillary Clinton's emails. We will get reaction from the panel when we get back.
We really need to get to the bottom of what happened at the FBI during the Comey years.
James Comey said Andrew McCabe stood tall, was just this model leader, and now he wants immunity because he knows he's in jeopardy with his conduct over this investigation.
Giving Mr. McCabe cover through immunity would be a mistake.
I would not give him immunity. I would make him go. If he's going to plead the Fifth Amendment, then he should plead the Fifth Amendment.
It is very, very unusual. I have to tell you, unheard of for the number 2 person in the FBI saying, you want me to testify? Give me immunity.
All right, let's talk about it with our panel. Jonah Goldberg, senior editor at National Review. Susan Page, Washington bureau chief at USA Today. And Byron York, chief political correspondent of the Washington Examiner. Welcome to all of you today. Okay, so this discussion about McCabe immunity, Jonah, it comes ahead of, we are waiting now for the Inspector General's report. Are they connected?
I'm sure they are connected. How and in what way remains to be seen. I'm very much in favor of getting all the information out here, whatever it is, about Comey, about all of it. I'm not sure it tracks to say we have to get to the bottom of this, as Cornyn was saying, and no way should we give this guy immunity. If that's the way you get the information out of him, the argument may go the other way. It seems to me there is an interest in the optics, which are very bad for McCabe, very bad for Comey, to have the #2 guy to FBI pleading the fifth. But if we actually want to get the information, I'm agnostic. If he deserves to go to jail, I want him to go to jail. If he doesn't deserve it, I don't. But I really think the American people need to get the information. Yeah, well, the U.S. attorney now looking into what was found by a separate Inspector General report about that particular issue, whether there will be criminal liability. In the meantime, Senator Chuck Grassley, who of course chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee, says before even beginning to consider whether to initiate the process of immunity, the committee would need to know a lot more about the anticipated scope, nature, and extent of your testimony. So, Susan, it sounds like they're leaving the door open to the possibility.
Well, of course, it's his constitutional right to either take the fifth or to demand immunity if they expect him to testify. But I agree, optics is the word of the day, that the #2 guy at the FBI, you do not expect him to find himself in this situation, but he must be so surprised to find himself in this situation, too, after a career in the FBI. Like, he's 2 days away from retiring, and he gets caught into this continuing controversy over the Clinton emails and over his the allegation that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and then misled investigators about it. It has got to be a shocking thing for him and his family to be looking at.
Well, and obviously what the Inspector General found in that initial report was that there was something less than fully honest in a number of these. And he and Comey were at odds about who was right, what information they actually shared. Comey's praised him publicly, but now should Comey be worried about what McCabe may say that could influence or hurt him?
And there's more that Comey should be actually worried about. The connection between the immunity request and the IG report is because the Senate Judiciary Committee has scheduled a hearing to discuss the IG report once it's made public. They had scheduled one for June 5th. That didn't happen. They scheduled the next one for next Monday, June 11th, and it looks like that might not happen, but it's going to happen fairly soon. They wanted McCabe to testify. Now he's asked for immunity, and there's more than just the Comey versus McCabe. I leaked, but you told me I could. No, I didn't. There's more than that. There's talk about there's information about when McCabe took a long time to recuse himself after his wife got a lot of political contributions that were kind of linked to the Clintons. And McCabe was involved in every other decision in this Clinton thing. So it's not just Comey versus McCabe.
Well, and another name in the mix, obviously, Susan, is Peter Strzok. I mean, how much do you think he is sort of wringing his hands and waiting for that report to come as well?
You know, the thing is, he was an FBI agent working on this case, and because of these very intemperate texts he sent to his girlfriend denouncing President Trump, he is seen as, I think, tainting the efforts he was doing when he was working for the FBI. That may or may not be fair, but he is now an inflammatory name when you see in things like one controversy of the day is the fact that the GSA turned over a lot of information from the transition team to Mueller without a subpoena, without going back to the Trump transition team to get permission. Strzok was part of that. It's as though we are in such a world of investigation that there is no element that does not get caught up in this spaghetti.
All right. Also, the Congress has been very busy with investigations, but now they're going to be busy in at least the Senate side in August, thanks to Senate Leader Mitch McConnell saying they're going to be in session. Here's the top Republican and Democrat from the Senate talking about what they might be doing.
Why don't we get something done on the issue that numerous polls say is the #1 priority of Americans, health care? We Democrats, our entire caucus, believes this previously unscheduled session time can be put to good use.
We need to confirm more of the president's team and judicial nominees. We need to take up regular appropriation bills. We need to tackle legislative priorities like the water infrastructure bill, the farm bill, the defense bill, and many others.
All right, Jonah, so both sides have laid out a pretty ambitious schedule. Does any of that get done? What does get done?
Yeah, I mean, there are conspiracy theories, or it's too strong a word, but there are theories that what McConnell is doing is trying to pull back Democrats from the campaign trail in August and make them be stuck here because the Democrats have a harder time in the Senate matchup. And then there are other people who say, no, this is what this is really all about, is putting a gun to the Democrats' head so he can cram more judges through. I don't see why we have to pick one of those, but I don't think that there's going to be some. This is not going to be, like the first 100 days of the New Deal coming out of D.C. in August.
All right. Meantime, we saw the First Lady today. The president had tweeted earlier this: the fake news media has been so unfair and vicious to my wife and our great First Lady Melania. During her recovery from surgery, they reported everything from near death to facelift to left the White House and me for New York or Virginia to abuse. All fake. She is doing really well. Susan, there's been a ton of speculation, but today we saw her. She did look well. She looked fine. And just a word, if my husband's watching, if you're going to deny something, do not deny I had a facelift, everybody, okay? Right. Pick something really, else. Not the approach I would like to see you take. I am sort of in the leave Melania Trump alone camp. She didn't run for office. She doesn't have an office in the West Wing. She's not weighing in on policy. And I think if she wants to, this got started because she was kind of out of sight for 3 weeks. But if she wants to stay out of sight for 3 weeks, it seems to me that's her business and we should leave her alone. Well, she's back and she looks healthy and we are all happy about that. All right, next up, getting ready for the Singapore summit and just how far the Obama administration may have gone to get a deal with Iran.
Be denied access to the world's largest market, and we will maintain powerful sanctions targeting Iran's support for terrorist groups.
Iran will be denied access to the world's most important market and unable to deal in the world's most important currency.
The Obama administration, during the negotiation of the Iran deal, misled the American people, and I think they did so because they were desperate to get a deal.
All right, let's talk about this with our panel. What you were hearing there early on was back in 2015, Treasury officials during the Obama administration and as they were negotiating the deal saying that Iran was not going to get access to key financial markets. Now, Rob Portman, a senator there, has come up with this report, his subcommittee, that it says essentially the Obama administration did grant a license that allowed Iran to access nearly $6 billion. Byron, and a lot of folks say it's not illegal, but they didn't tell us the truth about it.
I guess those statements are no longer operative. I mean, this shows that the Obama administration just flat out lied about this. And the idea was that the administration then seemed desperate to get a deal from Iran. And we know that they gave them all sorts of sanctions relief and billions of dollars. And then they gave them essentially this window in which they had the opportunity to use U.S. financial institutions basically to turn other currencies into dollars or euros. And this is completely against what they were saying. And by the way, if Donald Trump ever needs to say again this was a bad deal, he has one more data point to say so. Yeah, and apparently, Susan, members of the Obama administration went to some U.S. banks to try to get them to go along with this plan that they had. And we are told, at least in this report, that 2 banks said, no, thank you. These U.S. banks did not want to get involved with it. They knew sanctions were in place and they were afraid of the optics of it as well. Yeah, that's right. I think the Iran deal had already been reached at this point, but Iran was complaining that they couldn't get the benefits that they'd been promised because this money was parked in a foreign bank and they needed to convert it. So the problem isn't what the administration did; it's the fact that they misrepresented it or they weren't transparent about it, and that in the end. Doesn't it always come back to bite you? Yes, I kind of disagree with that, only insofar as I agree that the deception was bad, but the policy was bad too. I mean, in a lot of ways, this kind of reminds me of the Alec Guinness character, Colonel Nicholson in Bridge over River Kwai, where he just becomes convinced that we're going to show everybody by doing this great thing, building this bridge for the enemy. The Obama administration came into office with this theory that they could radically transform the Middle East by bringing Iran into the world of nations, in the community of nations, and they pursued this policy in the face of all the facts on the ground, based upon an ideological commitment, and then they bent the truth and bent policy towards fulfilling it. And it was a disastrous policy from the beginning. And one of the reasons we can tell it's a disastrous is they had to lie it into creation to get it passed, and they couldn't even put it before the Senate
to be an actual treaty, even though it was a treaty. It was from soup to nuts a disaster.
Well, and there's a former Obama administration official speaking on this, not wanting to put their name on the record, saying this: the specific license was in fulfillment of JCPOA, that's the Iran nuclear deal, commitments to give Iran access to pools of its money held overseas. It was aimed solely to allow the movement of Iran's own funds stranded at an Omani bank into euros at a European bank where Iran could then make use of them. Byron, they did get European banks to eventually agree to this, where U.S. banks would not.
But it is the deception of it as well, once they got to it. And here again, this was not something, as Jonas said, that could have gotten through the U.S. Senate. No way that he could do that. So it's not a surprise at all that the next president could completely undo something like this, and again have the ability to say, look, they didn't tell you the truth about this deal. It was a bad deal. They lied to you about it, and now we're finding out what they agreed to.
Okay, let's talk about the other big foreign policy issue. Of course, they're prepping for the Singapore summit next week, the president going to North Korea. We've got senators from both sides of the aisle talking about what they expect to see.
Our goal in this meeting and the Singapore summit must be the complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We hope that this results in peace on the peninsula. At the Singapore summit, all the eyes in the world are on it.
My principal concern is this, that Kim has the Kim family playbook, which has been used for decades to avoid actual compliance with agreements which have been reached with the United States and the world community.
Susan, North Korea has made deals before. They've backed out of deals before. What Senator Cory Gardner there said, it has to be a complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. I don't know that we're convinced North Korea thinks that's what this is going to be.
I can't imagine that on June 12th they're going to reach a verifiable, in concrete, complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. That is not realistic. What could happen, though, is the beginning of a process that is helpful rather than harmful in terms of kind of diffusing the most dangerous situation in the world, which is the nuclear program in North Korea.
And we have seen Secretary Pompeo and the president as well now managing expectations, Jonah, saying these things can take weeks, months, years. There can be multiple meetings. Don't expect the entire world, as Susan said, to reach a conclusive deal with North Korea come June 12th.
Yeah, I thought the Nobel Prize chance and all of that, by making the fact that Barack Obama didn't deserve his Nobel, to making that the new standard for getting one, I thought was a mistake. And I think President Trump and others were right for ratcheting down expectations. I think the best you can get out of this is just determine whether or not the North Koreans are serious at all. And that would be a success. But the idea that, I agree entirely with Susan, the idea that we're going to get the North Koreans to agree to anything substantial in this meeting, I think, is ridiculous.
All right, we will be watching. Of course, Bret has special coverage starting on Sunday night from Singapore. When we come back, seeing double on Picture Day.